All right, so tonight we are asking you, who do you think should be the next National Director of Public Prosecutions? Send us your comments and questions on WhatsApp to 072-110-5584. You can give us a call on 010-594-6010 or engage with us on X at Newzroom405. So now we have gone through those first interviews of today. We're joined by Organization Undoing Tax Abuses, Stephanie Fick, as well as Public Interest SA founder Tebogo Khaas, who will be continuing this discussion with us. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. Perhaps let's start with you, Stephanie. We saw those interviews taking place today, the 6 candidates that have been shortlisted. Maybe let's just start off with regards to the NPA as an institution. How would you assess its current state of independence, given the history of its controversy and that instability and the political interference that already has contaminated the institution?
So, good evening. I think that there's a bit of a trust deficit between, the NPA and just the general public. I think if you ask a lot of people, has the NPA lived up to the promise of what they are supposed to do? I think the answer would be no. So in our search for a new NDPP, I do apologize, we need to look for a person that will reestablish that trust. We need to have an independent NPA. The NPA is the only body in South Africa that got the power, the duty to prosecute. And we all want to see criminals behind bars. Now, although in the whole criminal justice system, they are but one cog in the wheel, they are a very important cog. And we need an independent NPA that will prosecute without fear, favor, prejudice, and without political interference. And unfortunately, through the state capture period, we've seen how, political interference can bring an institution to their knees. So in this process of looking for the new NDPP, we are looking for that person that will take, the NPA forward, that will instill that trust in that the NPA know what they're doing and that there will be no interference, political interference. But more importantly, I think we need an NPA that's got enough resources, that's got enough experience to do the job in terms of the constitution that they are supposed to do.
Tebogo, let's bring you into the conversation here. I mean, Stephanie speaks about a trust deficit that exists between the public with regards to the NPA. How would you evaluate this current process with regards to the transparency and the integrity of the selection process, and also just considering the public submissions as well as the publication of those CVs?
Yeah, thanks, Katlego, and to my colleague, Advocate Fick. Today was a good example of how not to apply for a senior position job, because what Advocate Johnson did was just a disaster. The performance was just a disaster. To start with, you don't submit a CV that is not current. Just that on its own just shows her attitude towards applying herself to her work and what is important. In this instance, you've got the chairperson of the PSC, you've got the Auditor General, you've got the chairperson of the Gender Commission, you've got the head of the SAHRC, you've got the whole minister sitting with you, and you're giving them a CV that still talk about to date from 19 something. And that's, for me, it's a dereliction. It just shows the kind of attitude she brings into her work, which is why she would rush to take matters to court before those matters are ripe for prosecution. And I think that underscored the caliber of the candidate that Advocate Johnson did. I was not privileged enough to have sight of the other 2 interviews prior to hers, save for the snippets that I've seen. But from what I have seen, it was enough for me to show how much we don't deserve Advocate Johnson in that position of NDPP. In fact, she should be swapping seats with Mr. Chauke and showing South Africans as to why she should not be removed. as the head of the IDEC, because what she's just shown is that she's just not cut for the job. She's not fit for purpose, and with that, just that alone is just reason enough to not have anywhere near any prosecution lane. She should not actually be carrying any gun for any prosecutor for that matter. So for all intents and purposes, I think Advocate Johnson just outdid herself. In fact, we had thought that her performance that she gave at the parliamentary ad hoc committee was bad. And as it now, as we all know, she actually invited herself to that a hearing. The original request or subpoena or invitation was for her boss, Shamila Batoyi, to come to Parliament. But she said, no, I'll go and do it. And there it is. It was just a disaster after disaster. So today it was nothing different from what we say. And we believe that the 208 objections to her appointment is just testimony as to the kind of person that she is. And she should never, not even have been considered for this candidature.
Advocate Fick, I mean, Tebogo speaks about Advocate Johnson having to have swapped seats with Advocate Chauke in the Nkabinde inquiry. What did you make of her interview today during this interview process?
That's really putting one on the spot. I have a slightly different view. I think if you look at the candidates, all the candidates, I think the first question I have is we only have 6 candidates, of which one I don't think should be there at all. We are looking for a person that will take the NPA forward. The whole panel has waited until it's the 10th of December. Shamila Batoyi is leaving this office at the end of January. You do not leave enough time. You did not leave enough time to look for the most appropriate person that will have the best interests of South Africa at heart and will take the NPA forward, that will build this trust, that takes prosecution serious and will show the rest of the country we are not scared to prosecute, and that we have the capabilities of doing that. So looking at the candidates, I do not know whether we will find our next NDPP in the interviewees. With regards to Andrea Johnson, all I can say is that, all 3 candidates has got the experience with in the NPA, which I do think is necessary. You need to understand how the NPA works in order to fix it and making sure that the prosecutors is got the necessary chutzpah to go forward. The morale, let me put it that way, the morale in the NPA is correct. But you also need a person that will say no to political interference. So I think she's got a strong enough personality. Whether the shortcomings in her CV is going to count against her, we will have to see at the end of this whole process. But then to come back to her interview, the whole issue about belonging to a union. The employer in this instance will always remain the state. And although you have a higher ranking position, does that mean you may not belong to a union? And whether that is relevant in looking for this one person that will take the NPA forward, I don't know if that was necessarily should have been a point of contention. And then although we have an esteemed panel, do we have enough experience in the panel that will know what we are looking for in the NPA necessarily? I also question slightly, I think from civil society, there was this question, is do we have enough legal knowledge and legal knowledge specifically from a prosecuting point of view? I can tell you, I was a prosecutor in my earlier days, and there's a difference between, for example, being a prosecutor, being in private practice, and then, for example, being part of civil society. You practice law differently. And, working for a government department is also different than running your own practice. So all I'm trying to say is that, it is a special kind of person that we are looking for. And whether we will find this special person, I don't know. Let's see at the end of this whole process. And then let's criticize all of the candidates as a whole and criticize them on relevant factors. Will they be able to take the NPA forward?
Well, it's certainly going to be quite a tough process for that selecting panel. Let's quickly take a break. We are speaking about who the next NDPP should be. Do engage with us, but we'll be back after this break. Welcome back. So today we saw that first leg of the interviews to appoint the next NPA chief. We are joined by Organisation Undoing Tax Abuses advocate Stephanie Fick, as well as Public Interest SA founder Tebogo Khaas, and we are asking you the question, who should be the next NDPP? We've got a few of your WhatsApps this evening. Makwakwa says Advocate Johnson should be the new NDPP. She is transparent and has a long-standing track record as a prosecutor. Oscar Nyakata says, I would prefer no one but Advocate Sello, the evidence leader at the Madlanga Commission, for the NDPP post. She does not have to be interviewed because she fits the profile. And then Spiso says, give us Xoli Khanyile, we need someone with no bad history. And the last one says, good evening, Bell and Johnson did not perform for me. Let's wait for the next 3 candidates to objectively assess all of them. That's Jay out in KZN. All right, so we heard some of those WhatsApps. Quite interesting there that they mention Advocate Sello, who is from the Madlanga Commission. Maybe, Tebogo, we can touch on that a little bit with regards to those candidates that have come in. We heard the Minister of Justice saying that that shortlist was of people that qualified and not necessarily a preferred shortlist. And many of the South Africans that she says would have qualified for such a position actually did not even apply. What does that say to us about how lucrative this position is?
Yeah, just on that subject, I'm glad you're raising that question, because we've already written, and I want to say we public interest in association with other civil society organizations, which I'm not at liberty to mention now because I don't have the authority to speak to mention their names, at least publicly. We have written to the Minister of Justice for her to favor the public with that information as to who were the actual 32 candidates that initially applied, and the methodology used to actually weed them out, shortlisted, that is. Because we believe that some of the conditions, for example, including 10 years at the senior level, managerial level, might very well have also sifted out otherwise capable candidates who may just as well have been the best candidate for the position of NDPP. And going back to what my colleague on this call had said earlier, just because somebody has been with an organization long and they know where the coffee machine and other things are, doesn't necessarily make them a good candidate for that for any position, senior position within that organization. In fact, it might very well be that it makes them even unfit, the worst person you can actually you may just as well get somebody off the street and do a better job than them, because they may be part of the rot that is within the system. We have had allegations from the likes of General Mkhwanazi saying there are actually two camps, if I may use that word, within IDEC or within NPA. You might very well ask yourself, which camp does Advocate Johnson fall into? And is that the kind of thing that you want to perpetuate? The kind of thing that you talk about, we've had when being quizzed about the issue about the morale of the staff. It might very well be that that morale will actually get will worsen with her appointment in that position. So it might very well be that it could take somebody else outside of the organization, or somebody who's not so much entrenched with the politics of the organization, to actually lead the NPA. Because we cannot make the mistake of, again, having another NDPP, such as we currently have in Advocate Shamila Batoyi, who doesn't read her own cases where she's making such very serious pronouncements on, including not reading the case docket of the matters relating to Chauke, or even the case docket relating to former Hawks boss in KZN.
All right, we seem to be losing some of your audio there, Mr. Khaas, but I think we've got the gist of really what you're trying to outline. And I mean, Advocate, when Mr. Khaas speaks about the quality of NDPP, earlier we heard from the Western Cape Deputy Director of Public Prosecution, Advocate Mop, and he spoke critically about Advocate Shamila Batoy's leadership. What did you make of that?
Let me say this, is that any institution is led from the top, and that an institution will go in a direction that is set by leadership. So although that not everything that is wrong with our criminal justice system can be laid at the feet of Shamila Batoy, she is the NDPP. She's, for example, not responsible for how the police handle intelligence, how the police handle investigations, whether they have the necessary skills and expertise to deal with difficult investigations. There are some of what went wrong with the NDP and what we, NPA, and what we are worried about, and the trust deficit. Shamila Batoy has to take responsibility because she was the leader. She has to take responsibility. I think, criticizing from the outside in is always, it's easy, and one sometimes need to understand, what is happening and understand the bigger picture to make sure that your criticism is well received. But that we have to work on an NPA that really can tell the people out there that we are able to prosecute and are able to make sure that the best evidence is placed before a court in order for a court then to make a ruling whether an accused is guilty or not. That is so. And what do we need in order to get the NPA where it was before state capture, before, there was an enormous amount of political interference? That is, again, we need a leader, we need an ethical leader that understands what the NPA is about and will have the moral courage and the independence to take the NPA forward. Unfortunately, corruption is rife. But while we can talk about corruption, and while corruption is in the news, and we've seen the damage that corruption has done to this country, we have an unemployment rate that's through the roof, and a lot of that can be laid at the feet of corruption. We cannot forget that we also have an enormously high crime rate, and that all of that speaks to, but we need change. We need to get the crime rate under control, and we need to prosecute the people that is responsible for corruption, but all other crimes. Murder rate needs to come down. Violence against women and children is an enormous problem. So all of that needs to be, everybody needs to sit around a table and say, but how are we going to fix this problem? And the NPA is a very important factor in that equation.
Most
but
certainly.
I think the most important factor is political will to do something about corruption, to do something about crime, the crime rate in our country, to create and give resources that we have a NPA that can actually prosecute the crimes that is brought to them by the police. And we have to work hard to get there.
Well, it's going to take a lot of effort from all parties involved. We do have Velapi out in Springs. A very good evening to you, Velapi. Who do you think should be the next NDPP?
Good evening. How are you, Catherine?
Good, thanks. And what are your thoughts this evening, Velapi?
My thought, it's simple, man. These people cannot be trusted, all of them. I think, as for my opinion, we need someone new that may be in the lower rank of the NPA, in the hierarchy of things, because even this requirement of 10 years, it also it's a barrier that may be able, that we find people that are capable at the end of the day. Because as far as I'm concerned, I once said when I was there that, when a product reaches shelf-by date, it must be removed from the shelves. You must not recycle that particular product. So all the people that are in NPA now, I don't think they are fit enough to ascend to the next position, because at the end of the day, they are all inflicted. They all have some skeletons. Even we are disappointed about women that we believe are women of stature, but their shortcomings, like Advocate Johnson, when she was part of the panel that was interviewing her husband. So then you cannot say because she was able to be transparent and the track record, then she qualifies. But it is the judgment that we need if we are going to be an NDPP. But if you fail in such small matters, when we are faced with difficult issues, what will be your judgment? As for one, I think we need a new prom and then be able to say all these old guards that have been in the system, they must be removed, because we are tired of the corruption that is happening, the shortcomings that is happening, because people now, there's biasness, there's people are hiring their family members.
There's certainly quite a lot to consider.
And so on and so on, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Velapi, for your thoughts this evening. Velapi saying we need a new broom, possibly someone from a lower rank, saying that we shouldn't be recycling those that already have skeletons. But Tata Khaas, we heard earlier on from one of the WhatsApps, someone saying that we need someone fresh, someone new, someone who doesn't have any of these scandals. And they singled out Advocate Xolisile Khanyile. And she's quite popular and for her extensive experience in prosecuting financial crimes. In fact, she contributed towards getting South Africa off the FATF grey list. What's your take in getting, like our callers just said now, a new broom that might sweep cleaner?
Yeah, that's a very valid comment, but I'm going to be very circumspect in whether I'm seen to be supporting one or the other, and then maybe just not being happy with the other.
Right.
But to the extent that Advocate Khanyile carries that experience, especially the financial background in terms of prosecuting financial matters, it will stand there in good state, somebody like that, because as we've seen, the Matsela Koko matter was kicked out simply because they didn't do good enough work insofar as the financial side of investigations were concerned. So somebody with that background would come. And also, Commissioner Professor Somadota Fikeni asked a very pertinent question as to what is your vision? Because it is one thing to talk about the past and maybe even the present, but what is your vision considering the fact that we've got a very evolving crime, especially organized crime environment, as we've seen, where there's even capture of the criminal justice system, and even the methods that criminals use today are not the same methods that were used when some people joined the NPA 30 odd years ago. So it might very well be that somebody who has been engaged in helping South Africa come off the FATF list might be somebody who might very well come in with new methods, a new vision in terms of how to, to deal with the financial crimes. Because at the end of the day, corruption, as we've seen it, has got its element on procurement and has got its elements in money laundering, has got its element in many aspects, which I would imagine somebody like Advocate Khanyile would have experience on. I don't know Advocate Khanyile herself. I haven't met her, but from what I've read about her, the kind of work that she's done at the FIC, I think somebody like that, obviously the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We'll have to wait and see how she, she acquits herself tomorrow before the panel. But so far, one thing that I want to stress and emphasize, Advocate Fick, is, as we all know, there's a saying that there's no such a thing as a momentary lapse of integrity. Advocate Johnson let her integrity lapse. Whether it was momentary or not, we don't know. We know that it certainly did lapse. And until today, she never even apologized or wanted to revisit that. And that she was not disciplined, it's something that we are taking very seriously. And we will be writing to the minister to ensure that she actually faces, because we cannot have people in that space. In fact, even IDEC itself, because even there's no term limits within IDEC. So it means if nothing is done to discipline or for consequence management insofar as Advocate Johnson is concerned, we'll still be settled with her. I don't know how old is she, but she's certainly not 60, I believe. It means, and if she still going to stay in the state, we must, resign ourselves to having somebody of her character, of her integrity, impeached integrity at the helm, and at a time where we need an NPA or a prosecution unit that is, free from any suspicions of bias, free from the kind of character that we believe has been shown about Advocate Johnson. So certainly for as far as I'm concerned, anybody but Advocate Johnson, I think, can do a better job in that space. And yes, some of the comments that you can take somebody junior, you need somebody who actually have the command of the institution as big as the NPA, because that is an institution that is very critical to the criminal justice systems. Without a well-oiled and functioning NPA, it doesn't matter what the police do. The police can do the best investigations, but if you don't have an NDPP who is up to the job, then certainly we are going to falter once more.
Well, it's amazing that you speak about that no momentary lapse of integrity. I remember the ad hoc commission, the ad hoc committee rather, the Advocate Botoy, when asked about Advocate Johnson being a part of those interview processes that included her husband, she said that she simply thought it was oversight of a young prosecutor. So it's quite interesting how we might all just view it in those very different ways. But we do have Mbuyisa from Ladysmith. What's your opinion this evening?
I will look at you. Kato, there's a problem here. With the candidates that have already been interviewed, I don't see anyone. Yes, Mr. Mop, I'm very impressed with him, but these two ladies, I've got my own reservations. The reason being that you look at this Director of Public Prosecution, the Western Cape, Mrs. Bell, Advocate Bell, up to date, she did not explain as to what happened to the case of this singer who happened to be killed here in KZN after killing a girlfriend, because there was a problem there with regard to the inquest. She didn't want to prosecute, but the inquest, in fact, directed her to prosecute. Secondly, we look at I don't know, the less I speak about Johnson, she was not there. She was not there. But my favorite candidate, I'll sound controversial, but Mr. Smilani is an ideal candidate for that, because even though people had little knowledge about him, they just make a huge meal out of the decision that was taken because of Chinwala Commission, because of the manner in which he handled the docket with Project Mabandla.
Right.
But all I'm saying is that he's an ideal candidate because there is nothing wrong in terms of prosecution or corruption that is leveled against him. Yes, Mrs. Kanyile, I don't have any problem with him, but I suspect, and we won't work on suspicions, but at her tenure in the Free State, and when Makashule was still a premier there, I believe that many things have happened in that province that actually we happen to know about them during Zondo Commission while she was still a DPP in the Free State. I believe to a certain extent some of the things would have been picked up there. She's not my favorite, but I can tell you that Mrs. Milani is my favorite because
the candidate that you want to go with. All right, Mbuyisa from Ladysmith, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts this evening. We're going to wrap up this conversation right after the break, so do stay with us. Welcome back. We are concluding our conversation with regards to who the next NDPP should be. We are joined by Organisation Undoing Tax Abuses, Advocate Stephanie Fick, as well as Public Interest SA founder Tebogo Khaas. So, Advocate Fick, before the break, our caller Mbuyisa spoke about Menzi Simelane being his preferred candidate. We know that he's going to be within those that are taking their interviews tomorrow, alongside Advocate Xolisile Khanyile as well as Hermione Cronje. With such controversies that would surround a candidate such as Menzi Simelane, that also some of the concerns that were raised by civil society, what do you think should be the non-negotiables when evaluating a candidate such as this?
Ethics. I think I agree with Mr. Khaas that we need ethical leadership. yes, it's easy. You don't want to, you don't want a criminal in charge of the NPA. But obviously, I sometimes think because are so entrenched with corruption that we sometimes forget that just ethical leadership is vital in positions like this. So someone that people can look up to, that will lead people, will lead by example. And it's not necessarily about doing, right things, the right or wrong thing. It is about ethics. We definitely need ethical leadership in this position. Now, when it comes to Mr. Simelane, it is, it's fascinating how, as part of the only 6 that that they chose, and it's not a shortlist, it's the minimum requirements, is why him, and he is shrouded in controversy. And I don't think we need that in a candidate for the NPA. He was removed from the position, and we hear this very often. You are not found, you're not guilty until found guilty. You are innocent until you are found guilty. However, that's a constitutional right that is afforded to an accused person. And this is where ethics becomes extremely important. So while someone, there's a process in our country, and we have, we have a constitution and we have a criminal justice system. And once you are put through that criminal justice system, yes, you are innocent until proven guilty. But it doesn't make you, in the meantime, the question is whether you are ethical or not. And sometimes, although you didn't commit a crime, what you have done is unethical behavior. So I do think what is priority again, I want to reiterate, what's priority with this appointment is someone that is independent, that can push back against political interference, that will fight for the independence of the NPA. The NPA is a pawn in the hands of the department. The amount of money, the budget that the NPA has is all at the mercy of the department. And, for example, just the appointments of the NDPP, again, it is the president, for example, that can make the appointment, and that we need some independence. So it must be someone that can take the NPA forward, that will instill that trust in the public, so the public know that we are doing something, we are holding people to account, and someone ethical that will inspire young prosecutors to put up their hands and say, yes, this is a career that I can think about, that we can work on our experience in the NPA, that people want to take up that baton again and say, but I want to, go fight on the right side of justice. So let's see how this process play out. I'm just afraid that I really think that they did not leave enough time, and that if none of these candidates pan out to be, the I want to say the perfect candidate. We don't, no one is perfect, but the perfect candidate for this position, that we should start afresh, that we should start again with candidates until we find the right person. And I'm afraid that there's not enough time for that. So what do we do in the meantime?
Sure, that's quite worrying. Dr. Khaas, just to close it off, perhaps talk to us about the importance of this appointment for ordinary South Africans and just how it impacts their daily lives with regards to the fight for justice.
Yeah, when we talk about the rule of law, the people who are constitutionally entrusted with implementing or ensuring that there is the rule of law in our democracy include the prosecutors, include the police, include the judges. If any one of those 3 components is found wanting, if in terms of credibility, it's going to erode public trust in the system. And once public trust has eroded to the extent that it has already, we are going to find ourselves in a situation where people no longer believe in the criminal justice system, never believe in our democracy. In fact, already we do know in our democracy, trust in our democratic institutions it's actually at the lowest at the moment. And we've got few institutions that are held very high insofar as the public trust is concerned, or reasonably high. Those include the Auditor General's office, include the Public Protector's office, include a few others, including the judiciary itself. Now, as we know now that the police sector itself is on trial before the Madlanga and Ad Hoc Committee, we have to be very mindful of who gets to take up the levers with the prosecution. Now, to have people who may have lapses in their judgment, ethical judgment, at the helm will be the biggest mistake that this country could ever make. So we can trust that those who are entrusted in recommending to the president that they'll do the right thing. And so far, there's nothing to suggest that they're not capable of the job. And we believe that whoever will emerge out of this process, remember, any process will have its own shortcomings, including how they shortlisted the 6 currently.
Right.
But as long as we ensure that at the end, the committee or the panel has done a thorough job in ensuring that they sift through and make sure that they lay bare any blemishes that might be attained. And we don't say people may not have any single blemish. You might find that in any career, you are bound to find something that you might have done. You wish with hindsight that you could do better. That is acceptable. But there are certain things that once it's done, like issue of trust, once trust is eroded, to win it back, we do not have time for. The public will not have tolerance for that. We are heading for an election now. We've already seen last year when some of the political parties were calling to question the legitimacy of the electoral process itself, despite the fact that they benefited handsomely from that. And once we don't have a system to adjudicate independently, here we talk about the judiciary and the NPA is part of that. We are going to find ourselves where there's a regression in terms of our democratic gains, and that is not what we should be bargaining for. And we hope that after tomorrow's interviews, the panels will go back and reflect as to where is important, which important boxes have been ticked by each one of those. And certainly, anyone who doesn't tick the integrity box fully must not be recommended for possible appointment in that position.
In that position. Well, the road to finding the next National Director of Public Prosecutions, the successor of Advocate Petoye, will continue tomorrow. And ethical leadership is really what we are looking for in this next candidate. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. That was Organisation Undoing Tax Abuses Advocate Stephanie Fick, as well as the Public Interest SA founder, Tebogo Khaas. Thank you both.